What's on, where and when.
It's the Talk of Nelson.
Talk Nelson Radio.
Sport. The Mako Rugby Roundup.
Welcome to episode 17 and the final episode of season 1. That's right, that means possibly there could be a season 2, Les, of the Mako Rugby Roundup podcast. I'm Chris Butler and my co-host, partner in crime, Mr. Les Edwards. Nice to have you here, mate.
Absolute pleasure to be here for our 17th and final show for 2022.
I know.
We got the boss with us, so he's
Yes.
assured me that he's keen for us to continue in 2023, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Beautiful spring day, and it's fantastic to welcome to the show Lyndon Bray. Welcome to the studio, Lyndon.
Thank you very much, and you'll be on next week, next year, depending on the questions that you ask me.
This is the trial. Hey, mate, you were first appointed as CEO in March 2021, and so, what's that, 20 months? So, how's it gone for you?
Great challenge.
Yeah.
I expected it to be a pretty major challenge for me. I mean, this is my first CEO gig.
Right, yes.
And it's actually an interesting story that about 11 years ago I was sitting with Mr. Steve Chu, who rugby people will know well.
Yes.
And I was saying to him, I'm off to Sanzar to work in Super Rugby and I'm going to leave New Zealand Rugby. And he said to me, why don't you stay and think about working towards being a CEO? And I laughed and said, never. I'm never going to be a CEO. And it's really interesting as you go through more leadership roles, I realised over my time at Sanzar that actually I'd really dearly love to get in there and actually be responsible for a whole organisation rather than just one lane.
Yeah.
And so it was his conversation that came back to haunt me when I saw the ad for the Mako.
Wow.
And I thought, what a story that the Mako and Tasman Rugby has. It's probably one of the most compelling rugby stories of our time in New Zealand Rugby. So what a perfect place to go and take on that challenge. And
So he must have seen something there in the way that you went about things. So he must have recognised it. Have you had a chat to him since?
Yeah, well, he actually mentored me through this process into the role. So he helped me with the interview. I learned about the 150-day plan that CEOs are almost inevitably asked.
Geez, that's like a president or a prime minister, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. And he's mentored me since. So he and I did a big review at the end of last year, for example. I think mentors are crucial in leadership roles in particular, probably in life generally. But I think when you take on leadership roles, you need to challenge yourself outside of your normal paradigm and your normal people involved with you day to day. So someone comes in from the outside has a whole different perspective. And I think that's valuable for rugby coaches, leaders of people, leaders of organisation. They're absolutely vital. So he's been a rock in the background for me.
Yeah.
So it's fair to say that your role at Sanzar was good training for this role, because you did manage and lead a group of people, including the leading referees in the Southern Hemisphere. So augured well for your transition into the CEO role as well?
Yeah, and I was lucky. Andy Marinos took over Sanzar in about 2015, so 16, I think, after Greg Peters. And Andy and Greg, for that matter, enabled me to get in front of the board on 3 or 4 occasions during my time. And you had to go in there and pitch what you wanted, particularly from a budgetary point of view. What you're trying to do with a group of referees from 4 different countries. So you're trying to get 4 CEOs and chair people to agree with your direction. So that was, in many respects, in hindsight, that was a really good learning curve for me to work with a board, because I never had up until that point. I have sat on a board, funnily enough. I've even been a chair of a board, but never actually had to deal with the board as a CEO. So I think that was valuable experience.
Awesome. So Chris, do you remember Lyndon as a referee on television and your rugby watching?
Well, I can't say that I remember the name Lyndon Bray, actually, interestingly enough, but maybe that's a good thing that I wasn't so focused on the referee.
Or that he didn't put
there was
himself
nothing
front
too
and
controversial, yeah.
No, it is a good sign.
Yeah, it is a good sign. So I want to talk a bit about your memories of your refereeing days, because I certainly remember Lyndon as being one of the better referees at all levels of the game, especially the way he played the advantage law. I thought you were very good at that. So let's have a little bit of a crack at talking about memory lane, Lyndon. So 1991, you made your MPC debut, and it was your first of 80 matches. That was Otago v Southland. Were you nervous?
I was very nervous. I was 20 years old. I came from Dunedin, so in those days you often refereed at home. And Otago was actually coached by a very, very well-known coach name of Laurie Mains.
Oh, right, yes,
and,
of course.
The interesting story about that game, he came and watched me do a club game the week before, and he obviously had decided while he was watching that I didn't get the tackler out of the tackle quick enough. So he turns up on the day, I'm in the change room, he knocks on the door and walks in, he's got his little black book, and he said, Lyndon, just turning to the appropriate page, he said, what is your view on the speed of the tackler getting out of the tackle? And I said, well, he's got to get out of there. And he said, great, thanks for that answer. So 2 minutes into the game, Southland tackler on the wrong side, and as I'm giving the penalty, I'm looking up into the main stand thinking, yeah, he knows what he's doing, that man.
Planted the seed, didn't he?
So he even does his homework on the referee before the game.
Oh, yeah. And it was actually a very good example early on in my career of how prepared and how across the game coaches are, and I mean even more so in today's game, as you can imagine. He was probably ahead of his time in that sort of preparation and work around the match. But yes, I was very nervous that day, and it was out on Carisbrook, which of course was the House of Pain, and that you grew up and saw all your heroes playing on Carisbrook. So to run out onto Carisbrook and referee Otago, and you're going to remember back then you had all the All Blacks used to play all the time.
And you're 20, and there they are on the paddock in front of you.
It was an incredible experience, yeah.
Your last game, 2008, which coincided with your last games across many types of the game. Ironically, Tasman versus Bay of Plenty. I guess that was at Blenheim, was it?
Now, it was in Blenheim, and Dan Perrin, who's one of our co-head coaches, was playing prop. Don't think I penalised him that day. So yeah, that was special now in hindsight, because of course I had no idea back then that I'd be coming back to Tasman, and because Tasman only started in the competition in 2006, I wouldn't have got to referee them.
Right.
Had it not been for that fixture. So, and now here you are, 14 years later, CEOs.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it? 2002, your Super Rugby debut, first of 30 matches, and that was the Blues versus the Chiefs. So how's that comparison going into refereeing Super Rugby as opposed to, say, MPC?
The only thing I can say, I've said this to referees who come through the system, you cannot explain it until you get out there and actually experience the difference. The sheer speed of execution, the speed at which they're ready to go again, you don't get a lot of downtime. And someone said to me before I went out onto that game, you won't remember the first 20 minutes. You literally just sit in the back seat. It was the best advice I got, actually, was sit in the pocket and just let the 20 minutes go. You got two fantastic rugby teams at that time. And I don't remember the first 20 minutes. And I actually commentated the whole game for 20 minutes. So I just commentated every action, and then I ended up shutting up after about 20 minutes.
Okay, out loud.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that got me into the train of the game. But that was 37-30, I think, and it was everything you'd expect of a Blues Chiefs game. Eden Park, beautiful day. I remember a 100-metre intercept try, and of course we had the TMO. You signal for the TMO, and I had to because I was 20 metres behind, and the guy dived and he was being tackled, so you had to go to the TMO, and I couldn't talk. I was like,
It's Try to keep up with it.
Just the best of the best players, I guess.
just super,
the speed it would be amazing.
Oh, Super Rugby back then was so attack dominated. Now the game's defence dominated, and I think it's a real shame that in many respects refereeing's gone with the defence. And what I mean by that is that the attack team gets penalised at least 50% of the time at when the ball's in play, and that to me is a real worry for the game, because philosophically you want the attack to have confidence, and you want them to have confidence to have the ball in hand. When you're getting penalised every third or fourth ruck because someone's on the ball and you can't clean that player out quick enough, the game loses its ability to evolve. So that scares me about where we're going with the game. Back then, attack was just so colourful, and you could just sit and go with the flow of the game. You know, remember the Brumbies? We've always talked about how the Brumbies would go 20 phases, and people used to think that was unbelievable. You know, now you're lucky if you go 4 phases without a whistle. So. Yeah, that's a concern, I reckon.
Yeah, I know it's a bugbear of mine when, the attacking team has the ball for a microsecond and get penalised for holding on. And it just ruins the flow of the game. So I'm with you on that. Funnily enough, you made your Test debut before your Super Rugby debut. That was 2001, Papua New Guinea versus Vanuatu, a Rugby World Cup qualifier. So the background to that appointment and how much you enjoyed it?
Well, New Zealand referees often get the games up in the islands, and I mean you can work that out for obvious reasons. It's financially, it's a good deal for World Rugby. Aussie and New Zealand just straight up into the islands. So a lot of Kiwi refs would start off up on Test matches like that. I was very lucky that I got 2 tests in a row in Vanuatu, and they decided it was cost effective to leave me there. And we were in over there, everything's resort style, right? So
and that still ended up being cheaper.
Yeah, well, not so sure. So I was sitting in a resort all week, basically having this amazing holiday back then, and then, Saturday, we better go and referee a Test match.
But that was the start of a pretty decent journey in Test match rugby, and coming to the finale, which was 2008, you had 2 cracker Test matches. You had South Africa v Wales, and you had South Africa v Australia over in the Republic. You'd obviously decided that was going to be the end of your refereeing, but wonderful to get those 2 fixtures, wasn't it?
Well, ironically, I announced to my boss at the end of 2007 that 2008 would be my last year, and I had actually been dropped off the Test panel. And I felt one more year of Super Rugby, and then I want to get on with my professional life outside of rugby, certainly outside of refereeing, because I've stayed in rugby, funnily enough. But so I said, look, this is it. I'll have a great year of Super Rugby, a little bit of NPC, and out of here. And then I got the phone call during Super Rugby. Oh, you've got South Africa, Wales. And at the time, Wales had won the Six Nations. South Africa had won the World Cup. So, that was a huge series over in I was in Pretoria, followed by South Africa, Australia, and the Tri-Nations as it was then. So, that was really exciting to finish that way. And South Africa, Australia was my last game. That was it.
Right.
Wow.
So it was a great way to finish.
Yeah, well, you did have a great career in refereeing. Now, lovely gesture by New Zealand Rugby this year in that they decided to cap every Test referee. As I understand it, your Test referee number 60 went up to Auckland to a function, got your cap. What was that occasion like?
Well, it was great in that we had, 100 referees in the room, but pretty close. There's not that many more that have actually done Test footy, funnily enough. But to have everyone together, and we had Paddy O'Brien, Colin Hawke, Glenn Wallstrom, Calvin Deaker, Paul Honish, all the guys that I'd refereed with back at the start of my international career. You don't get the chance to catch up like that as a group. Right. So it was a pretty special day, and I think the most emotional part for me was for refereeing generally, that you saw a lot of older referees who were able to turn up, who probably during their career weren't as well recognised as what we are now from a professional point of view. So of course they're always unpaid. We often said, referees are over there, that group. So it was nice to see those guys, the Tom Duceys, Bob Francis, Keith Lawrence getting recognised for their career. So well done, New Zealand Rugby, because I think it was a really fantastic gesture for refereeing.
And probably some reunions will follow in due course.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
So now as CEO, you've got this juggling act because you've got high performance and community rugby. And on a much smaller scale, I've kind of been in that position as president of a touch football club in Perth. And we put a bigger emphasis on development coming through and for state titles and for representation. And of course, someone comes up to you and says, well, all these, so much focus on elite, what's happening at the grassroots. And so you have to turn your attention to that. It's a real fine balance, isn't it?
Dear to my heart, this discussion. So it is the crux of the issue for a province in rugby. So I think it's really important, on the one hand, to understand just how critical the Mako success and the Mako brand is to Tasman rugby and to both provinces, Marlborough and Elson, who make up Tasman. To have that team strong and to have a team that can challenge right to the top of our NPC, I think is an incredible value for this province. And the Mako brand's one of the reasons why I was very enamoured to actually come to Tasman. I think there's great opportunity to be leveraging that Mako legacy, not just in our region but globally, and that was exactly why Fanatics and Be a Fanatic .nz, if I'm right, Les, is really important to the long-term strategy. That'll be a slow burn, but a really important development for us to have our fans engaged into Tasman rugby. And that Mako brand gives us the revenue, the commercial revenue stream, and the support of local business to actually then focus on the second issue, which is we have to protect our clubs and make our clubs sustainable. The whole idea of my first concept that I tried to bring in and we're working on and implementing now is the club champion model, where every club has a capability manager, someone who's paid who can actually oversee the implementation of club strategy for each rugby club, who has a senior Division 1 team. Therefore, hopefully our expectation is a women's team. So we're trying to build that foundation, junior rugby, and then obviously their link into age group rugby. So that whole structure, have we got that right? Absolutely not. We don't have that right. We've been working in the last year on what the right strategy is at the right amount of money, because it is an investment. There's no question it costs you money to build a really effective structure. I'm probably accused of, if anything, I would say if you brought some club leaders in here and challenged where TAU is at, they would say, well, too much talk and we haven't taken enough action yet, and I totally understand that, but we have a real responsibility to making sure we can financially sustain that and make the right decisions. So we are well aware we've got a hole in our age group area. We need someone who really builds that strategy for age grade rugby, and that's understanding the transition of 12-year-old kids through into high school, 14, 15, 16, then at that point where they're going to leave high school, can we make sure that we've got an engagement and a real hook where that, say it was a Maris player, because I know Les is here, does that 12-year-old Maris player get a good experience at school and hopefully his club, to the point where he says, hey, when I'm 19, 20, I'm back in my club playing club footy. We're not winning that battle. So we need to build better strategies around our age grade rugby. We've got a massive opportunity with women's rugby, and we're super conscious of that. We've got some great plans. I said to the council delegates the other night, I'm going to under-promise and over-deliver here. So I'm not going to tell you that we're going to be amazing in this space, but we are definitely ready to flick the switch and build a really strong women's strategy. Mel Bosman and the FBC Mako were amazing this year, and that, again, it's important to have that flagship, because when they won in Blenheim against North Harbour, all these particularly young females, turned up to watch the team. And you see that same process that happened with boys turning up to go, hey, I want to be a Mako. So it's important to have a team that you enjoy watching, hopefully who wins from time to time, and who but equally are scoring great tries in the Mako way. So the women's space is huge. We are in the process of commercialising our FPC Mako jersey, which is a really big step in the right direction, so that we can equitably finance the female game as we do the male game. So those two areas are huge, and the third area that I think is huge is coach education development. So getting coaches on a pathway through age grade into club footy, and potentially for those who are aspirational through to the Mako development and Mako teams themselves. And the last one's the club sustainability, which comes back to your club champions and also strong leaders running their clubs well. So that's quite a lot. And we're in front of the board on the 25th of October to pitch our strategic investment. Obviously, Silver Lake has helped us be in a position to do that. We were a strong part of the negotiation for funding, so we get a really good uplift annually as of next year. So I've had to ask the clubs just to be patient while we get through 2022. We've had some headwinds like most businesses have had in terms of growth of revenue. We've actually grown, ironically enough. We have gone back up, but our expenses have gone up, as most businesses have experienced. So we've tried to work out how can we afford to do this investment and at the same time keep the Mako successful and give everyone confidence that we can move forward with money in the bank, which we're very lucky we have. So I think the future is really encouraging, but what's critical is that we take those next steps and put it into action. And we need clubs collaborating with TAU and everyone feeling like we're in this together. And we're not at that point yet. I think we're well on that journey, but we need to win their trust by action.
Well, there's no doubt that you've got to have a strong strategic foundation before you get to execution. So, I know that you're working through the strategic side very thoroughly. But next year the clubs will want to see some action, and you'll be ready for that. So that's all well and good. That's marvellous, in fact, what you're planning to do, because community rugby, as you said in your touch example, is at the base, and it is a pyramid, and without community rugby there is no pinnacle of Tasman Mako rugby for males or females. On a lighter note, we've got... We talked last week about our Mako awards, but we also had some community awards where we recognised some good people in the community game, including the referee of the year, Lyndon, Ben Alexander, got that award.
Yep, and he's a great example of a young man in the province who... I don't know how much rugby he played, but I suspect it wasn't a lot. I suspect he was similar to me, but it would have played rugby into high school, made a conscious choice to get off the field and take up the whistle as a pretty young man, and he's in his early 20s and now on the radar for New Zealand rugby. So he's a great example of the sort of referees that we're looking to recruit through Nelson College, Marlborough Boys, Waimea, Galen, all those schools where you're going to have boys who say, hey, I want to opt out of the 15-a-side rugby at some point. Here's an alternative career. He's done really well. And, he's followed in the footsteps of guys like Stephen James, who's been an amazing club referee for us here in Tasman. Probably should have gone further between you and me earlier in his career, but for whatever reason didn't get that chance. He's been probably our leading ref for, some years, So having guys like Ben coming through is great. Our biggest challenge is holding people in the region. There's a strong chance Ben will move on because he's a pilot.
Yes.
Doing very well with that career, so no doubt we'll lose him. But what you want to see is that we as a region have fostered those people to a certain level. And if we can keep doing that, then you keep replacing them with another good group of young men.
Yeah, well, I think the real challenge is youth.
Yes.
Or young people, young men and women who want to referee, because that just takes the pressure off everybody. Coach of the Year went to the winner of the Tasman Trophy Central Club, Quinton McDonald, a really well-deserved award. Would you agree?
Oh, look, it was a bit of a no-brainer after you watched Central at the business end of the competition, and you and I were there at the final on their home ground. I don't think I've seen a better club team performance as what they did in that final since probably University A in Dunedin in the 1990s, who and University A would have 9 All Blacks and 14 Otago players, and a Central rolled out a performance which I thought was just superb in that final.
Yeah.
in all respects. It was comprehensive.
Yeah, and the preparation was tremendous. Just the way they warmed up for this game, Chris, it was professional, it was thorough, it was quick, it was clean, and then they went out and put on a performance that, Marist just couldn't compete against. So, yeah, I think Quinton McDonald definitely a coach of the future. In terms of players of the year, for the females, it went to Kolatita Lupe Itu'u from Marist. She was the prop who went on and played for our Tasman Mako FBC team, so well deserved for her. And for the men, Braden Stewart from the Central Club.
Yeah, and both players, as you say, they have forged careers now in the NPC, and that is a really important message in that. And that, is every club player going to be able to aspire and transition to be a Mako player? Well, no. It takes a certain character and a certain athlete. You've got to have that combination. There's a lot of players who I think can potentially be the right athlete, but they've got to put the mahi in to be able to compete with the Aucklands and the Hawke's Bays and whatever. It's a different ball game, right? So those two are great examples of players who have worked very hard in the HP program, therefore in their own specific position have become strong physically, but also great characters, like great warriors.
Yeah. Good people. And lastly, Chris, I'm just delighted that for the last 5-6 years, the club player of the year has gone on to get a Mako contract, and I think that's really critical.
Yeah.
You've got to reward the best person in your female and male competitions with a contract. I think, because otherwise, why compete?
No, philosophically, you're right. They've still got to be able to transition to the right athlete. But you're right. Philosophically, you want to see club players being able to see that there is a pathway.
Great to have the All Blacks in the region. It's caused a lot of response from the locals who've come out and seen them at the training pitch. So wonderful to have them in town.
It was a stunning response from the community, like the amount of children that were there excited to beat the band was the highlight for me. Like I just thought that was remarkable. And I mean, to get over 3,000 people turning up for a training run early in the morning, so people had to get up and make that conscious decision they were heading off. We had a lot of people from many miles away than just Nelson City. So that was really special. And I think it reminds people too of how critical your top rugby teams and brands and the image of those brands is. To have the All Blacks in your backyard is huge. And well done to them for some of the work they did around the city. I know the social media they did, where David Avilli took a group of the players and they did some video and showed where the devastating areas are, what was the impact, and they posted all that on social media for us and for the community, for Nelson City Council. I know the council was delighted with their interaction around the Merrill Fund. So that's fantastic.
Great stuff. 2022 going into 2023, where to from here? So obviously difficult season, injuries, some positives were some fantastic young players have come through. Where do you see it going into 2023?
I see a nucleus of young boys who have, I call them boys because, God, they seem so young, right? Young players who are going to be the nucleus of our team for 4 to 5 years, which is really exciting. They've had a lot of game time. So I have no doubt that they will take the team in terms of performances and outcome. They'll go forward. I'd love to see them back in that top 4 next year, and I think that's absolutely doable. I think the coaches have learned a heap from their first year as co-head coaches. I think they're good men who work well together. We've had really good feedback. I think they've got some really good learnings. So I'm not panicked at all about an outcome. I'm more interested in what they learn and how they move forward as a group. The Maka Springers, the Noah Hothams, the Viliami Napas. You look at the amount of players we've got that are coming through playing for the Mako. By playing, I mean they're actually in the match 23. That augurs really well. Our big dilemma next year is Rugby World Cup. So not only do you lose your All Blacks ongoing, but we've also got players prone to being selected for their country. That's going to put us under the pump, quite frankly. Not only in terms of losing the players, but financially, because they go with our blessing and get paid. So that has a financial repercussion for us. So it'll be a challenge, but I think we're well placed.
The Mako always have to have a generational change. We had it in 2012, we had it in 2016, we're going to have it again in 2023, and that just brings these young and exciting players to the forefront. And so the number of Tasman representatives with a black jersey will just continue to grow.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, it's been absolutely fantastic to have you in the studio with us for our final episode for the season, and it's great to get a perspective of the organisation overall and what the plans are going forward. So it's been an absolute pleasure having you in here.
And thank you to you guys for what you do for community rugby and people being able to tap into what it is that's special about Mako Rugby. So thank you for what you do.
Well, it's a lot of fun, isn't it, Les?
It is. We enjoy it. Merry Christmas, Lyndon.
Yeah.
Merry
Yes,
Christmas,
almost.
Chris.
Yeah, you too, mate. Thank you very much for your time, Les, and your passion about the game. This podcast wouldn't be possible without all the energy and all the preparation that you do and getting a fantastic guest. Thank you, Lyndon. Keep up the good work, mate. It's fantastic. It looks like a bright future. And that's it for Season 1 of the Mako Rugby Roundup. You can listen to this episode on talknelson.co.nz or on our Facebook page, and also 9 o'clock Friday nights on Fresh FM. We'll take a short break over the summer period and we'll be back ready for community rugby in 2023. Thanks for listening. This is the Mako Rugby Roundup.
The Mako Rugby Roundup. It's the talk of Nelson.
Talk Nelson Radio.